sounds like something. You know, they come out
I'm sorry to interrupt your lunch and your conversations, but I'd like to get started if we can. You know, people say the seminar is going to take an hour, right? And then it goes an hour, hour and a half. And this is not going to happen. And the basic reason why it's not going to happen is because I have a wedding to go to at 4:30. And I have an hour commute to get there, and I have to change and all of that. So I can guarantee you it's going to be 1 hour. But I'm glad you're all here and can enjoy the beautiful day and the lunch. And the hospitality here of the Castle on Aging, the Eagle House, is beyond compare. I'm David Guyden, and I run the program that Susan introduced called the Discovery Center for Civic Engagement. You'll be introduced to that today besides the seminar. And the idea behind civic engagement is really a powerful one. It has to do with the fact of, giving of yourself, and then the idea of getting back. And it's a powerful thing to do. Those of you who are currently volunteering probably know that. But what we're going to help you do through the Discovery Center for Civic Engagement and through the transition navigators who are in your center and who are actually here today, who are trained to help work with you to find your purpose, to translate that purpose into some meaningful work, I'll use work in quotes, with a social purpose in mind. So you'll be introduced to that today. Before I get started, because we'd like you, if possible, before you leave, not only to do two things for us. One is to help me by filling out a little questionnaire we have, which is a way of evaluating the seminar. It helps us do a better job. Would appreciate that. But the second thing I'd like you to do is connect with one or all three of our transition navigators who are here today. So I'd like to just raise your hand, say hello. Susan?
Susan O'Sullivan.
Jamie?
Jamie Toll.
And Lori Ann.
Hi, Lori Ann Tess here.
Okay, so, again, the idea of connections, of course, is a very powerful thing, too, that has to do with, as we age, making sure we keep up our connections. So here are 3 new connections you can make if you don't know the 3 of them right now. But hopefully afterwards, you'll find it a benefit to you to follow up. So, today's seminar is called Thinking Beyond the Money. And you've probably gone to seminars, perhaps even here through the center or elsewhere, where someone who's a financial advisor or someone who is in the business of doing retirement planning met with you, either individually or as a group, to talk about your finances, which is a very important part of the structure you need in retirement. This program deals with everything except the financial. So these are the non-financial aspects of retirement planning. And it's a big topic. What we typically do when we get into these programs is we try to break them down into some bite-sized chunks. So we'll have 6 different components of the non-financial aspects of retirement planning for your consideration. In front of you are several handouts. The first is, of course, the seminar slides. And, of course, I apologize. I'm trying to save trees, so I put 3 of each of the slides on each page. Some of the print is incredibly small, and you probably can't even read it. I can't. But it does leave room for you to take notes also, if you wish. The second thing are worksheets. And these worksheets we will be referring to as we get into the program. And the final thing that you'll have is some resources that you can use afterwards if you wish to do some further reading. Any questions before we get started? Good. Everybody's in the right place, that's good. I hope you've enjoyed the lunch, which was a beautiful lunch provided today by the Eagle House. You know, we're doing this program, the Discovery Centers for Civic Engagement. This is our second year now, funded by the Massachusetts Councils on Aging. This is the group overriding all 351 towns, cities in Massachusetts. And we did a pilot in the last year, and one of the pilots was your Eagle Center here. And I have to say, you know, working with Susan, it's been wonderful because they're sort of our poster child for what should be done properly. And the turnout here today is an example of that. And we just like working with the organization here and hopefully furthermore all of you. So let me get started. This is a slide that I think is supposed to have impact. And when you think about it, you know, since 1920 to 2020, there have been some 30 years of active, healthy living added to the average life. And that's average. Some far beyond that. That's the result of medical science, and the things that have happened in medical science have really contributed so much to our longevity. I'm also a product of that. Back in June 2020, I had my heart valve replaced. And it wasn't by open heart surgery, it was through the groin in a procedure called transcatheter aortic valve replacement. I was out of the hospital the day after the surgery and feeling great. So, you know, this is an example of how medical science has really done something for all of us. The second thing that I think that contributes very powerfully to those extra years are the choices we all make individually. You know, the choices for healthy eating, exercising, you know, keeping yourself sharp mentally, those kinds of things. So the combination of that has led us to these extra years. What do you think's been the impact of that, or what is the impact of that? Anybody can just shout out something that you think is possibly the outcome of those extra 30 years.
More exciting life.
More exciting life, of course.
More medical costs.
More medical costs, did you say? Yes, it's a cost to society as well as individuals in a sense, and it's something we have to cope with. Very true. Anybody else? You know, Social Security is running out of money, they say. That has to be dealt with. So, you know, when Social Security was developed, it was designed for people to retire at 65 and probably live a year or two. Well, we sort of faked out the government on that one, you know? So now they have to figure out how to make this work longer term. It's just totally upset the system. But there are so many impacts of that. The other impact, though, is all of us together as a group can have a profound effect on society by giving back in those years. The question is, what are you going to do with those extra 20 or 30 years, and how are you going to spend it? And that's something we'll be talking about. So, you know, I got involved doing this in a way that I never thought would happen in my life, but I spent my professional career in institutional investing, retirement plan services, strategic planning, mostly in large banks, Chase Manhattan in New York, and ultimately Fleet and Bank of America up here. But when I left there, I started a business and ran it for 10 years, and when I disposed of that, I stuck out my head and said, what am I going to do now? And that led me to start to do strategic planning with nonprofits. And that ultimately led me to building this program that I'm able to, with great pride and joy, run. So you never know, you know, where that's going to take you. And that road has been one that is, you know, for me, been a good one. So I could spend the rest of this hour asking each of you to tell your individual stories. I'd love to hear each of them, but we don't have time for that. So let me just ask, how many of you right now consider yourself, quote unquote, retired? Okay, good, everybody around the table. How many of you are currently volunteering? Fewer hands go up. Okay, so, you know, this is something we want to focus on as we get through this. You'll although this program is not as pointedly directed at that as a previous one we did here called Discover Your Purpose and Discover Your Encore, where you actually put together an elevator speech for what you want to do. But as you go through this, think about ways that you might want to engage, especially when we get into the area of being connected to other people and how, perhaps more involvement in your community could make a big difference for you. So before we get going any further here, I'd like to, let's see here. I'd like to ask a question, and that is, what are your expectations? You saw the little write-up on what this program is about. What do you expect to get out of this hour?
Social.
Beg your pardon?
Social.
Sorry?
Socializing.
Socializing. Okay, that's a good thing. Yes. It's this idea of community, being a part of something bigger. Thank you.
Just ideas on what to do as I do get older.
What's next? What to do? Okay, very good. Anybody else? Well, again, I think those are both expectations that are certainly quite reasonable given where we're at today. I think what you'll find is that it's going to give you a lot of other things to think about, and we hope that with the material we've provided, that'll be something you can take with you. So let me tell you what our focus is. Our focus is first to educate, inspire, and motivate. Each of the areas will give you something you can do after this program. You don't have to do them all at once. You can do them in any order, but hopefully provide you with some of that. In terms of the outcome, to think about and understand the value of planning in advance. I had a business school professor who, in a turn of a phrase, said, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. That's sort of not the way you want to get there. I could have tried that to get to Lunenburg from, Wellesley, where I started out today. I probably wouldn't have been here in time for lunch. But the point is, know what steps are required and try to think about the value of planning ahead. And the agenda will take us through what we call a new stage of life. We'll do some of the background for you first before we dive into the work, and a new way to plan for it. So as we start this program, again, shout out, we want to make this as interactive as possible, so please contribute. What does retirement mean to you? What are some words that come to mind?
It's just a new phase of my life.
New phase, okay, yeah. And that has a lot of implications, doesn't it? I mean, everything new you've never done before, so you have to react to that. And it's something that takes you into uncharted territory, and sometimes that is a little unnerving.
Scary.
Scary, I get it. Okay, good. I'll put that down. Yeah. Anybody else?
Learn new things.
Learn new things? That's definitely important, because we like to say, lifelong learning is what it's all about. And finding the opportunities to learn and engage is part of that.
You have the time to learn new things.
Sure, it's time. It's the idea of flexibility, right? By the way, as you think about retirement, as you think about volunteering, that's one of the beauties of volunteering, because it's not like work where you have to show up every day. You could say no. Sometimes that's the hard thing for some people. Anybody else want to add? What? Yes?
Health issues.
Health issues, yes, for sure. They come oftentimes as a surprise. Oftentimes it's something you're dealing with long term, but hopefully, there's ways to deal with that as well. But it's inevitable, that's part of it. Anybody else? What does retirement mean to you? Yes.
More opportunity to learn something new.
More opportunities
To learn something new.
learn something new. So learn new things, and you have basically more opportunity to do so. One of my goals is, we have a electric piano sitting in our basement. And I used to play saxophone when I was in high school, but I always wanted to play a piano. I've never done it yet, so that's one thing on my list, to learn how to do that. They say also using both your hands helps the brain too, so hopefully I'll get there. Anybody else with some things about retirement? Yes?
More time to socialize with friends.
Good. And, it's interesting, the idea of time sort of comes up, regularly. It's how you use that time that's going to be the important thing. And that's one thing that is a given. Time is something else. That's great. That tells me a lot about what you're thinking. That tells me a lot about the fact that I think we're on the right course here to take us forward. So when we talk about retirement, there are several dimensions to that we think about. One of them is stereotypes. I can think back to my mother and father, and at my age, they weren't doing the things I'm doing. But today, the stereotypes don't exist or shouldn't exist. There is this thing about ageism, and it's something that we all want to fight. And I think we're, equipped both in terms of speaking out and also acting in a way that breaks down those stereotypes and the stigmas that are associated with it. But one of the things we hope also for our Discovery Center program is that over time we're going to break down those barriers. The community's going to recognize the value of older adults in giving back to their communities, and the effect of that is I think going to be very big. But what that leads to, because of that, this extra 30 years, because of the things you're talking about here, is we need to take some new approaches to what we're doing. We try to base our work, our seminars on research, and researchers tell us several things. One is, yes, we've added those 30 years. Secondly, retirement, as I mentioned, was a 20th century invention, and we're breaking the code on that now. Third, it was designed for shorter lives, but overall that leads to we need to find new ways to plan. I love this chart, which suggests that there is that new stage of life, and which you mentioned, and here it is. It's these bonus years between midlife and then beyond that we can be actively engaged. In essence, this chart also, in those 100 years, added another dimension, which was this idea of adolescence. Again, thinking back to my parents' time, I don't think they really had time to be adolescents. They went from being children to working, basically. Most of us probably, by the way we've raised our kids, have given them this wonderful time of adolescence to grow, to develop, to mature. And it's a very valuable gift. Sometimes that gift gets returned by your kids moving back in with you, but that's another matter. Right now, I think that's something that's important. So, contributing, we talked about that. Learning, being actively engaged, and the idea of time. So if not now, when are we going to do it? One of the things that the transition navigators are helping to do is to identify opportunities for people to volunteer within a 5 to 10 mile radius of Lunenburg. And when you start making that list, it's amazing how many nonprofits exist that can be supported. And believe me, nonprofits need support more than ever these days. So we're talking about longevity yielding the new stage. So let's look at transitions. Someone mentioned the idea of it being a little scary. And it is, because it's uncertain. So there's this new life stage, And it requires us to make transitions. Now, transitions typically have two things going at once. One is an inner push, and another is some external trigger. That's all right. I hope she's fine. So I'm going to ask you to help me talk about what these inner pushes and external triggers might be. Let's start with external. If there's a transition that's going to go, and by the way, one way or another, I sort of think we're always in transition, whether we realize it or not. We're always going from one thing to another. But what are some external triggers that cause one to go into a transition phase?
Well, your health.
I would say become,
Health?
Health.
Health.
I would say become more, but if you have grandchildren,
Say what?
I would say if you have grandchildren,
Yep.
and you can be proud of them, if you work with your grandchildren, you'll learn much more.
Very true. Very true. So let's enter health as an external trigger. And
Family.
your grandkids can be a trigger. Yeah? Good. Okay. Anyone else? External. You know, you could sort of make a decision on home and where you want to live, where you need to live. Maybe those are
Money, finance.
finance. Yes, for sure. Absolutely. Anybody else? Well, that's good. That's a good list. So those might cause you to, think about that. How about inner pushes? These might be a little bit harder to come up with, but what are some that might things?
Boredom.
Say what?
Boredom.
Boredom.
I'm never bored.
You know, people in their jobs, oftentimes in their careers, found themselves, whoa, I can't believe I'm getting up for this again in the morning, right? Anybody else?
Loneliness, if someone's lonely, they make themselves go out.
It's what?
Loneliness.
Loneliness?
Mhm.
Yes. And they're sort of connected, but those are other things that could trigger a transition, certainly. So that's great, but the idea is then, what do we do in response to those triggers? Well, we make a transition. The question is, how do we go about it? There are three ways we've identified. The worst way is what we call cold turkey. So that's sort of the idea of, gee, one day you're working and the next day you're retired. That's bad. Studies have shown that first year after that decision is frankly deadly. One's health, physical health, mental health, and other reasons. Because you lose your support group, you lose your connectivity with others. There's, of course, the other way to go, which is step by step. My brother, who's a rocket scientist, actually, that's the way he approaches things. He's very much organized that way, step by step. Me, I'm more of a guy who goes phases in and out. I'll try something, if I don't like it, I'll try something else. But as you think about your transitions, and even as you think about looking at other volunteer opportunities, think about how you're making that transition. One of the things we know about transitions, though, is they elicit responses, anxieties, and excitement. So what are some things you think in transitions that make you anxious, and why? Yes?
The unknown.
Unknown, yes. Uncertainty, right? Anybody else, what makes you anxious about change?
Finances.
Finances. See, amazing how often that comes up, isn't it? Yes. And what's exciting about change?
learning some new things.
Learning something new, yes.
Probably meeting new people.
Pardon?
Meeting new people.
Meeting new people, yes.
Ways to meet new people.
And who else?
It's ways to meet new people in your community.
Community, okay? Ways to meet new
If
people.
you're the new person in your community, you're not going to be the one having people knocking down your door. You have to be in charge.
Very good. So, yes, all of these things you see are things in a sense which can be either made better by planning or made less of a problem by planning. So that's why we like to say we want to look forward to that. So the question is, why plan beyond the money now? The questions there lead to, what does planning do for you? Well, it does several things. It expands your choices. When you plan, you're basically not necessarily eliminating choices. You're keeping your options open. You're exploring new options. That's something I tell my daughter, she lives in Singapore now. She's with Johnson & Johnson. I said, the best way to manage your career is to keep options open and make sure that you have options at all times. The worst thing is not to have options. So that's one thing. Secondly, you reduce risks. These kinds of things. Or the risk that the outcome is not going to be anywhere near what it was that you wanted in the first place. You sort of make your own luck, in a way. When I know so many people that, and people refer to them and say, boy, that person is so lucky, look what happened in their life. Well, you might look at what they actually did, and more often than not, they planned for that to happen, so they made their luck. And then finally, it creates clarity. The confusion, the uncertainties that we talked about, by planning, you can help to eliminate. One of the things we like to say our programs do is move people from confusion to clarity. So we hope we're helping there a little bit. And what counts most, though, for health, happiness, and long life? Well, there was a study. It was a 75-year Harvard study. Leave it to Harvard to take 75 years to figure out that people who are more socially connected to family, friends, and the community are happier. But this study, longitudinal study, did sort of prove that people are physically healthier, that people live longer than people who are less well connected. So it all sort of comes together in that. So the questions are, and each of these we're going to take in turn as we look at the worksheets and go through the rest of the program. How ready are you to know the resources you need, to know how to keep fit as you age, to know where you will live, to know how you're going to use your time, to learn how to stay connected, and basically to help keep purpose in your life. Every program we do has to deal with purpose, because this is what gets you up in the morning. This is what drives you. And we'll be talking about those. But before we do, we're going to have a little exercise break here. I know sometimes sitting too much leads people to, get sort of stiff. So, I'm not asking you to do anything that's going to cause anybody to get overworked here, but I am going to ask you to put your chairs in such a way that you can do these various exercises. You can sit first on the edge of your chair, don't fall off, and then just sort of run in place. Okay? Just move your feet, move your arms. You can do this any time of the day. It helps get the blood flowing. There you go, I love the sound. It gets you moving. And it's just not sitting there. Excellent, let's try the next one. This one is good. Now this one you can fall out of the chair if you're not careful. But you're still sort of on the edge of your chair. But all you have to do is keep that rear end on the chair. Put your legs out and your arms up. Simultaneously. Now look at that. You're opening up the chest. You're expanding. and you're having, a good time. All right. The next one also does that very well, and that's just taking your arms, breathe in, and out. And you can do these exercises anytime, right in your chair, right at your home, and it really gets things moving. Then the next thing you do is you talk to your transition navigator about what you want to do with your volunteer work. This is one, who's Amy Poehler from Saturday Night Live, this is one I have trouble with, but it's where you pat and rub. That's easy, right? Okay, now change. I don't know, I sometimes have problems with that. Okay. But anyway, that's just a little break here we'd like to provide in the middle of it. Thank you. Now get back on your chairs. So what we're going to talk about now is a new way to plan. And we have 6 components we're going to deal with. Purpose, staying connected, finding security, keeping fit, finding home, and finding balance in your life. Now, purpose is something that we have a whole seminar on. And we talk about, talents, skills, interests, and motivation, and translating that into a statement for your own purpose in life. If you go to the worksheets that we've provided, and by the way, you can take this home and share it with people, or give it to some other people that you know. There's a little explanation about the Thinking Beyond the Money program here, but the first one is purpose. And if you see here on purpose, it asks just 3 questions. If you ever think back to when you had some purposeful experience, what were you doing? Were you maybe helping others? This is on page 3 of the worksheets. Were you helping others? Were you using a skill? Were you solving some problem? Anybody want to offer a time when they thought they were in some kind of purposeful activity like that?
When my kids were little, raising children.
Raising children?
Yeah.
Sure, that's everyday purpose there, isn't it? Sometimes I get that feeling by doing a crossword puzzle. And, you lose track of time. And that's what purpose is all about. You're in some purposeful activity. And the question is, what drew you in? Was it some kind of personal meaning? Was it inspiring others? Was it an opportunity to learn? Reading a book. You can just lose yourself in it.
I think that's just everyday stuff. Reading books and listening to music and,
Yep.
playing with things on my tablet. That's not purpose. That's just time killing as far as
Well, but you're right. But basically, then you're in a zone of some sort,
Yeah.
and you know it, and it's something that you can also recreate
Well, yeah.
if you want. And that's the third question there. We don't have to fill them out right now. But the question becomes then, how might you make that happen again? And I translate that into doing volunteer work. I've talked to people, for example, who are engaged in Habitat for Humanities, where they're out there pounding nails or putting up drywall. And they love it. It's not something they did in their career, certainly, but it's something they're doing. And when they're doing it, it has all the components of purposeful activity. They're doing something for somebody else. They're working in an environment with other people. They're acquiring new skills. Maybe they're pounding their thumb too, but nevertheless, they're probably doing something new. Those are the kinds of things that make it all worthwhile. Security. Several mentioned during some of the shout-outs the business about finances, and that's certainly part of what makes one secure. On page 4, we sort of have just an open-ended area there where we want you to think about, and again, we don't have necessarily the time to think about all that right now, but we want you to think about the things that really threaten your sense of security. Is it savings? Is it health? Is it the long-term care? Is it something where you need paid work? Is it debt that you're carrying or medical expenses that have been coming up? But, you know, this also gets to the point where you want to give back to the point of supporting others, perhaps, and basically planning that part of your future. And of all of those things, if you really think about it, there's probably one or two things you could write here that say, okay, this is the one step I'm going to take to address this concern of security. And then the idea is, you know, to go ahead and act on it. Several people, and this is now on page 5, have talked about staying connected. Well, again, that notion of close personal relationships are associated with longevity and happiness. That could be family, that could be friends, that could be people you're engaged in some nonprofit activity with. That could be people in this room whom you've met as a result of your coming to the Eagle House. So all of these things are really important. What this particular part of the worksheet is asking you to do is, and again, we can think about, you know, who are the people you can rely on, who are family members or friends and neighbors or others in your community to whom you might, you know, turn in a time of need. And that could also be turned around. You know, where is it where you are the person that somebody else can depend on in a time of need? My wife and I, you know, for years, you know, worked with a woman in our neighborhood who we got to know through our church, who, you know, was a single woman all her life. She was a very powerful person in her work career, and you know, several times, and she would call on us, and you know, it was important that we sort of help her. Several times those calls came at 2 in the morning, but you know, the point is, this is what makes the world go around. One of my favorite stories about her is she's 85 years old and she wants to get her driver's license renewed. And so she said, could you take me to the RMV? So what did I say? I said, yes. So I did. So we're there at the RMV, and then she gets to the little booth, you know, and then they asked her to look in this device about her sight. And I said, well, this is the end of that, you know, so at least we did it. So she's having trouble, and she was feisty, so she would say that what they were asking her to see was not there. And the person to the right, behind the counter, apparently saw this happening. But it turns out the person to the right said, oh, David. And I looked, and this was someone who used to work for me at Fleet Bank years ago. And so, believe it or not, my friend Frances got her license renewed. I don't know why it happened, but it did. And, you know, to have her, I used to follow her sometimes, and I know that she was driving with one foot on the gas and one foot on the brake. Not the way to go, but at any rate, sometimes some of us need help, but sometimes that help comes from places you don't even recognize. So, staying connected. Keeping fit. This is a kind of a fun area. So if you turn to that page 6, you'll see a grid here with 4 different areas on it. And I'd like to just take a little time right now, if you have a pen or a pencil or you can borrow one, in each of those areas, give yourself a grade. A for excellent, B for you're doing well but you could do better, C is average, D is much room for improvement, or F is nowheresville. You're still trying to figure that one out. So in each of these areas, exercise and movement, and you can read a little bit about it, diet and nutrition, brain function, and sleep. Give yourself a grade.
Just need one simple introduction.
Yeah.
If you look these 4 and you're not happy with where you are, find the nearest senior center in your town.
That's a good advertisement for the senior center.
what is being offered.
Yes,
Find out what's in your town.
yes, they can help you
Don't
with
sit
it.
at home.
That's it, that's very good. And that was the problem, of course, during COVID, right? Where people couldn't be in the centers. And that was a hardship for a lot of people.
It was very.
I asked one of the Council on Aging directors about that, and I said, you know, what was the greatest impact on your population? And I said, was it the people who came to the center all the time, or as I suspected, was it the people who didn't come to the center and were even worse off? And she said, actually, the biggest impact was those who were coming into the center all the time, because suddenly they were cut off from that connection. And that was very difficult for the people who were actively engaged in the center. And I think the centers tried to do a good job reaching out, but it was a tough time. So this is only the 4th seminar, by the way, I've done since COVID started. The others were all Zoom calls, which is fine. They worked well, and we adjusted, but I love being in front of people. I think it works better for everybody. So at any rate, all right, how many of you, now I'll just ask, what is the lowest, think about the lowest grade you gave yourself in all of these. So who had as their lowest grade exercise and movement? Okay, 1, 2, 3, all right. Who had diet and nutrition as your lowest grade? Okay, that's a concern, yes. And all of these are, controllable. Who had brain function as your lowest? Okay. And sleep. I'm going to raise my hand here too. Because I have the same problem. I'll tell you, waking up at night just is something that I'm not used to at this point, but I'm trying to get over that. So, think about, exercise and movement. Again, to your point, Councils on Aging offer wonderful programs
Yeah.
that enable you to get out, get with people, move, and learn new things. Diet and nutrition, there's so much available now that you can read and things you can do. Not using, in my case, as much salt as they used to, perhaps. But diet and nutrition is also an area that one can control. The sleep thing, I've become philosophical about it. I said, if I didn't sleep tonight, I'll sleep tomorrow. So I'm not going to get excited about it. That's the best way, I think, to deal with it. It's the only way I know to deal with it. And brain function, as I mentioned, crossword puzzles. So we get the Boston Globe and the Wall Street Journal every day, and so I switched doing those crosswords. And that's another thing, too. If you do, like, the Boston Globe crossword puzzle every day, suddenly, it's not as hard as it was because it's sort of a routine. But then if you switch to a different kind of crossword puzzle, that's what you do. So brain function, for any number of things that you might do to increase your brain function, whether it's these apps that are ubiquitous.
That's what I use. I have apps on my tablet that I use that I think are
They're very good.
good to keep me on my toes.
Yes, the apps that you can use. But what they find is, again, using that same app over and over, there's a diminishing return over time. So switch apps if that's what you're interested in. But so again, this is the point of this is, look, recognize where you have the problem, figure out what to do, and take it. It's sort of this idea of planning, isn't it? It's always involved in making changes. Just as with this next topic, finding home. A recent study found that 80% of people surveyed want to stay in their homes, want to stay in their communities. But people do move. For kids, we mentioned, for friends, costs, and even weather, Except it looks like the weather from the south is coming north, so who can say? I was driving here today and I heard that there's a new U.S. News and World Report study of the best places to retire. And I guess 4 in New England, in Massachusetts and New Hampshire, made the list. 24 or something was Manchester, New Hampshire, and that's because of the mountains or whatever. But surprisingly, Springfield and Worcester were on the list, as was Boston, you know, for being a city but still offering a lot of things. I'm surprised Lunenburg wasn't on the list. You all have it made here. I think I love the surroundings, and I think you're in a great spot. So, but at any rate, the point here with finding home, and we try to make this simple, but you know, sometimes we oversimplify maybe, but what we're doing here is just creating a little a balance sheet, like you have, you know, in finance. You know, on the one side is a reason to stay, and on the other side is reasons to go. And again, by simply writing down why do you want to stay in your community, why does it make sense for you to remain here, whereas if you put in the reasons to move, and then sort of look at that as a balance sheet, and then this little area at the bottom says stay and move. You'll put a little caret somewhere between stay and move. And if you do this over time, you might find that the stay caret goes a little more toward move. Or for whatever reason, your move caret more toward stay. But it's just one way, a simple way to look at this.
I already did the move part 7 years ago, 8 years ago.
Really? So
Yeah.
you moved to this community?
Yes, I moved to this community.
From where, may I ask?
Missouri.
From Missouri?
And mostly because my daughter lives up here.
I see.
So my husband died, and she said, you can't stay there. And
Well, very good.
here I am.
Now, how did that transition
It
go for
was
you?
pretty traumatic.
Was it traumatic? Yeah.
Well, partly because my husband died, then I sold my house and everything in it,
Yes.
and moved up here, and we were living in the country, so I'm not used to cities.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, it was a big transition, but like you said, I had to make a decision then
Yes?
to leave my home, where I lived for
Exactly.
40 years,
Yeah.
come here.
Well, you know, I have a friend of mine, he and his wife decided to move from East Greenwich, Rhode Island to Savannah, Georgia.
Oh, that's a big one too, yeah.
Because he wanted to play golf year-round, and they wanted to be not with their children, but near enough. So they're at least 4 hours from all their kids. They said that's ideal. But he also found, by the way, speaking of golf, you know, that you can't have a steady diet of that. So now he's on the vestry of his church. He's involved with the condo association, and that's volunteering. You know, that's being outside yourself, which is a good thing. So here's an interesting one now, finding balance. And again, so many of you mentioned this idea of, you know, you have flexibility. You have the opportunity to say no, or you can direct yourself in certain ways. We have a chart here, and I'd like you to turn to that on page 8 of the worksheet. And you can take a little time now to fill out the top part on your current life. You can either make it a pie chart, or you can fill out the percentages here to add up to 100%, and then make your pie chart. But the idea is, how are you currently spending your time among these options? Work, family, friends, learning, play and leisure, spiritual, we added, and that's not necessarily religious, it's, you know, being spiritual. And you can add others if you want, what makes sense to you. But fill that out so that it adds up roughly to 100%. And then once you've done that, do the next chart, which is how would you like to spend your time more into the future. This chart was designed for somebody still working, thinking about retiring and how you're going to change your life. But in this case, since all of you are retired now, think about how you're spending your time now and how you would like to spend more of your time in the future. So this gets into the idea of flexibility, controlling your time, controlling your life, and even giving yourself time to volunteer. Anyone like to offer some of your thoughts between now and how you'd like to change? Because then the idea is you take that changes and then you know, write down what kinds of things you need to do to get to that more balanced future. Anybody looking to make some changes? Go ahead.
Well, I have 0% under friends now because the 4 best friends I have, 2 moved away and 2 passed away. So, I mean, they moved far away.
Yes.
So I need to be part of, you know, doing things and make friends again.
And, you know, one way to do that is to,
I'm
Yeah.
trying, right,
Good.
slowly.
one way to find those new friends is to expose yourself to
Right,
more
I've only
people.
just started coming back to it again.
That's good.
Yes.
Yes. And, you know, in a volunteer opportunity, for example, you're going to be working with people, you know, that you don't know.
Right.
And that leads
But it
to,
is hard because especially after the pandemic, you stay in your own little cubby.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then it's hard to go out again.
exactly.
You're doing very well.
It's very difficult though.
I understand.
That's great.
I can still
That's a very good example, thank you. Anyone over here have any offer, anything to offer? Well, you know, as I think about, you know, what I'm doing, you know, to make changes, I think that idea of learning something new is what I'm very much trying to accomplish. So we're reaching the point now where, having gone through those 6 different components, what I'd like you to do is turn to page 9 and think about what we've talked about. We're going to build that pyramid one block at a time, but what we're going to do is figure out how to take that next step. So what I'd like you to do is on page 9, just put numbers 1, 2, and 3 as to what your priority is to begin your planning process. What's the one thing that is most important, do you think, given where you are right now, that you need to do? Is it purpose, security, connections, fitness, home, or balance? And then second and third. We've done 1, 2, and 3. What I'd like you to do now is just raise your hand when I get to each of these, and you're only allowed to vote once now. But I'm looking for what's your number 1 priority that you're going to work on. What's your number 1 priority that you're going to work on? Vote once. Who's working on purpose? 1, 2, okay, 3. Who's working on security? Number 1 choice. 1, 2, okay. How about connections? 1, 2, 3, okay. Fitness. Hey, look at that. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, okay. Home as a decision, okay. 2, 3, all right. And balance. Balance in your life. There you go. Okay. So you can see there's an interesting dispersion there. Yeah, fitness is a great thing. I mean, my goodness, my daughter is very committed to that. You know, she's in her late 30s, and she does it every day though. You know, that's the point. She gets up in the morning, she exercises, and then she does her day. So it's a thing about how you make choices, and all of that comes together then as a result of that. You know, the idea of connections, purpose, all come together, I think, in the Council on Aging, as well as in this work we're talking about, certainly of getting involved with your Discovery Center. So we wanted to hope that we have helped you to look at redefining retirement have introduced you to a planning model, and that's the point of the worksheets. You can take them with you and work with those in your home, but offering those tools and resources, including the resources in the third handout, which are, just organized in a way that you can go to a certain area and pick out either a book, a website, or an article that might be of use to you. But the outcomes are, we hope you're coming out of this understanding the value of planning, knowing what steps you can take, and really being committed to action. Here's one big action you can take, and that is to seek out your transition navigator. I hope when I leave, I'm going to have to leave to go home to get ready for this wedding I'm going to, but when I leave, I hope you'll all stay a little bit and talk to the transition navigators or the transition navigators to you, just to get to know them and see what steps we can take. This is the mission statement of our Discovery Centers. We use our Senior Center as a convener for the Discovery Center. We're reaching people midlife and beyond, helping to find purpose and motivation, to engage with nonprofits, your local government, other community agencies and such, and to use your skills and experience, basically, to engage in work with a social purpose. And when I say work with a social purpose, it could be volunteer, or it could be paid work. You never know, it might lead to something like that. But the point is, you'll reap the benefits of this. It comes back in big chunks back to you. The idea of your local government, too, is an interesting one. There are so many spaces usually available in local government, whether it's a Natural Resources Commission, which gives you an opportunity to be outside, or whether it's something related to maybe something you've done in the past, finance or planning. But all of these are very important ways to give back and get connected. So for the transition navigator assistance, the idea is timely encouragement. It could be phone support. You might have 2 or 3 meetings or checkups. They could be here in the center now that we're open, or they could be on the phone or remotely. But the idea is to review your goals. The transition navigator is not going to tell you what you should do. You're going to tell them what you want to do, and they'll help you connect with a good opportunity. So schedule an appointment, and we hope, working with any one of the 3 or all 3 of them, make them busy. We hope that you'll get involved and make a difference. That's the idea. So finish the plan by thinking through the worksheets and thinking through the kinds of things you can do. And here's an interesting quote which says, sometimes the smallest step in the right direction ends up being the biggest step of your life. Tiptoe if you must, but take the first step. And we hope you'll do that. And I thank you very much. You've been a great audience. Anybody have any questions or anything I can help? Yes?
Yeah, who said that last quote?
I have the name there and I don't know who it is. I picked it up off the internet.
I like it.
I should have looked that up. You caught me. Thanks a lot, everyone. Have a great day.